In class, we viewed a video entitled Journey of Man, a PBS special that featured Dr. Spencer Wells talking about the genetic origins of Homo sapiens and of the journey they made from Africa throughout the globe. In the course of that video, he made a few references to evolution, which I presume to be something that he believes in quite a general sense. And this has, as expected, I'm afraid, led to a controversy. I have asked a question on Blackboard about the views of members of the class on this question of evolution, and I have reviewed all of the answers that I got. About half of the answers were not troubled by Dr. Wells' statements. They had courses in the sciences, either in high school or college, and have accepted that this theory of evolution is quite plausible, supported by some evidence, and doesn't contradict any religious beliefs they have. But another group, perhaps about 30 to 35%, were troubled by it because it does affect the way they perceive their religious beliefs. I have no interest in attacking anyone's religious beliefs or philosophical beliefs. I'm simply trying to present evidence in order to get onto the issue of how culture affects all of us. To do that, I need to address the issue of race. Otherwise, throughout this course, what I will be calling culture, someone else will be saying, oh, no, that's really a racial cause. So, I need to address this issue of evolution. I have no particular reason to give an advanced theory of evolution or to support such a theory. Instead, I simply would like to look at what the evidence is that supports the fundamental core issues that Spencer Wells discusses in Journey of Man. To do that, I'd like to start with the most hard evidence. Now, there's a lot of the words theory and the word evidence perhaps needs some explanation. Theories are almost always supported by some evidence, but the best of the theories, the ones that we regard as the most valid, are those that have a lot of evidence to support them. And I'm only interested in this course in dealing with anything that is theoretical if it is supported by a lot of evidence. So let me go with what evidence I think supports the core thesis of Spencer Wells in the video Journey of Man. And it starts with a simple observation about human beings, their biological makeup, and their reproduction. However, the first Homo sapien was created, whether by God in an act in the Garden of Eden or by some other process, once Homo sapiens were here, they reproduced. And in the process of reproducing, mutations occurred. In fact, they are occurring today. Somewhere on the face of this globe, at this very moment, the act of reproduction is taking place, and a mutation is occurring. Some of these mutations are visible, and some of them are not. But there can be little doubt that mutations occur. Take, for example, the issue of pigmentation. I'm a lightly pigmented person, but I have some pigmentation. But there are Caucasians in the city of Chattanooga who have no pigmentation at all. Their hair is completely white, their eyes are pink, their skin is pink, they are albinos. That is a mutation that occurs. And in Chattanooga, and I've seen this gentleman, there's a gentleman with obviously Afro-American characteristics, curly hair, appropriate facial conditions. His hair is snowy white. His skin is pink without pigmentation, and his eyes are also the pink eyes of an albino. There's nothing wrong with these mutations. They're just simply the characteristics of those people. And as I say, there are a lot of other mutations out there. Mutations that are not visible at all. Mutations that create diabetes or Alzheimer's or sickle cell anemia or heart disease or a proclivity for cancer. All of these mutations are occurring constantly. I don't see how anyone can doubt that mutations occur. But if mutations occur, and if people with the mutations mate with other human beings, those mutations are going to pass to the next generation. And if two with the same mutation intermarry, then the chance for that mutation to spread as at least a regressive gene in the population go up dramatically. So mutations occur, and in that sense, a kind of evolution occurs. Now, to separate it from arguments about evolution that cause problems for people in their religious beliefs, some people choose to call this microevolution. It's simply an evolution that has occurred once human beings, or Homo sapiens, first appeared on this earth. So the next question would be, since mutations have occurred, since at least a kind of evolution, perhaps microevolution, has occurred over a period of time, the next question would be, how long have these mutations been going on? And that means that we need to try to date or come to some understanding about how long Homo sapiens have been on this earth. Now, we can learn a great deal. We can learn that there are structures built by Homo sapiens that are made out of wood. And by looking at that wood, it's possible to look at the tree rings from the trees from which they are cut. And it's possible, theoretically it's possible, to take any piece of wood and link it to the exact year that that tree was planted, the exact year that that tree was cut. How can it happen? Well, tree rings tell us, because of their width, either whether the year was a very good year for tree growth, which leads to a wide ring, or was a bad year for tree growth, which means it was a narrow ring. What makes it bad or good for a tree to grow? Well, water, for one. So if there's a drought, you're going to see a narrow ring. Or if you're going to see a very cold year, you're also going to see a very narrow ring. But let there be a warm, moist year, you're likely to see large rings. And you can track these rings and tie it to evidence we have from meteorological records that show us in our own lifetime, or in the last couple of hundred years, what the temperature has been in any given year, and tie it to that tree ring. And then, if we get a tree that's old enough, perhaps like a giant sequoia or a redwood tree that has, or a cypress tree that's grown for 2 or 3 or 4,000 years, we can get a whole string of tree rings going very far back in time that is going to give us a record to go by. And then, if we had a tree that was cut down 3,000 years ago, which was itself 3,000 years old, you can track those tree rings back perhaps 6, 7, 8, 10,000 years if you had trees growing in the right sequence. Now, it's not easy to do, but there's scientific equipment that can simply measure tree rings and tie them together in a pattern that extends over time. Furthermore, that's not the only source. One can also use ice cores from Greenland or northern Canada or Antarctica, drill them quite deep and come back with tens of thousands of years of ice cores showing the layers, again, with thick layers for years in which there was lots of snow accumulated, and thin layers for years in which there was no snow or very little snow at all. So these tree rings can be matched to ice cores and extend the amount of time further back in time. Then there are various chemical experiments that can be done to show how much oxygen or how much carbon or how much carbon dioxide are inside of various substances, plant growth, rock, soil, and so on. And these also can be tied to whether the year was a moist year or a dry year, a cold year, or a warm year. And that can further extend our information back in time. Finally, we can come to evidence based on carbon dating. The carbon dating is possible because we know that there are certain elements that are radioactive, that emit electrons at a regular pace over time. And by looking at the chemical composition of these chemicals, carbon being the most widely discussed, it's possible to track the rate of deterioration of this carbon atom and determine how old something is. Now, some people complain carbon dating is not accurate. Well, it's not accurate to a day of the week or an hour of the day, but it's accurate within a year or two, going all the way back about 70,000 years. That is a really large bank of evidence that shows, because it can be tied to the existence of Homo sapiens on the earth, it shows that Homo sapiens have been on the earth for at least 70,000 years. And in fact, the video talks about going back 100,000 years, and that's also a pretty solid piece of information. Now, tied to that next is the issue of genetics. What we learned from genetics within my lifetime are remarkable things about how each human being operates. Each person's DNA is individual. But patterns exist in the DNA that allow people to be linked to their fathers and mothers, grandfathers and grandfathers, and so on back in time. And you can extend this back as long as you can extract DNA. And they have been able to extract DNA from bones going back 100,000 years. There are even experiments underway to go back even further in time using fossilized materials. It gets harder the longer or farther back in time you go, but it is still possible to do. That's the evidence that's critical for Spencer Wells and the Journey of Man. And his data dating Homo sapiens to 100,000 years ago is very solid. It further is very solid on showing that the only Homo sapiens that were on the globe 100,000 years ago were Homo sapiens that lived in Africa, the southwestern corner of Africa. And by tracking markers within that DNA, it's possible to show the pattern of migration that occurred from Africa to all other points on the globe. That's the solid information. It further establishes that there's only one race of humans. Now, I'm going to take up the discussion of the popular conception that there are more than one race in another lecture. But let me not leave the subject of evolution just yet. This solid evidence that I've talked about stands on its own. It doesn't need to hang on any other theoretical concept. That evidence that I've tracked from mutations, tree rings, ice cores, chemical analysis of the amount of oxygen in substances, and carbon dating is extremely solid. This is not some weird theory that's presented. It's all over the scientific literature, and it is the underpinning for the video Journey of Man that we watched. Because this evidence is so strong, people are tempted to use it, and other biologists, other scientists are sometimes tempted to extend it back theoretically further in time, to make statements about where Homo sapiens came from, to make arguments about Homo sapiens descended from other upright walking primates, mammals who are primates. Hence we get this sort of popular notion that man evolved from apes, except of course no reliable evolutionist claims that. Apes and humans evolved simultaneously and had some, in their theory, hominoid predecessor. I take no statement on that. I don't attack anyone's religious beliefs if they believe that God created man and woman, Adam and Eve, in the Garden of Eden. It's not necessary for the purposes of this course or for the video to make any statement or to make any assertion about the evolution of Homo sapiens from an earlier hominoid that might have lived on the earth. Furthermore, there's no need to assert anything about where life came from. There are some evolutionists who try to start with the evidence I've given and track all the way back to a notion that life itself began by accident, that there was a slurry of amino acids in a swamp somewhere, lightning or a gamma ray or something struck it, and wham, we got the first single-celled organism, an amoeba, I suppose. And some will go even further and try to track back the nature of the universe to something like a Big Bang. I don't need to go there at all. Those are theories that people advance. They believe they have evidence to support them, and I don't say that they're wrong. I just simply say that they are theories, and they are theories that I don't need to use to teach this course. So, it seems to me that one can look at the hard evidence in this course without feeling that you have had a religious view that's been attacked. No matter where you stand in Christianity, whether in Roman Catholicism or in Protestantism, and within Protestantism, whether you stand with conservative evangelical Protestant